to do what? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Brother in Christ, my partner in women's basketball crime, Martin Sories, my guy. It's been a week. How are you feeling?
It's been a week. You've been on vacation, wearing suits and eating multiple entrees and living the life, man.
Yeah, man.
Living the life.
Living the life. Just
Yeah,
in the nick of time, it feels like, also, considering what's going on.
Just a lot going on. A lot going on. Your Aces have played their last game of the season. Unfortunately, the Liberty took care of them, and we won't get into that. We may need to revisit that. We'll talk about them a little more later. But it's WNBA Finals time, man. It's finals time, baby, and this is kind of, well, you predicted it. I was the exact opposite. I said Vegas, Connecticut, so I was all the way off.
That's true.
You were all the way right. That's on
true.
It. We both knew that these were. I mean, it was clear that these are the two best teams all year. So I think it's gonna be a basketball treat, man. There's some great basketball about to be played. I'm pretty sure.
I've never been more upset that I got a prediction right. I'll be honest. In the 4 years I've been doing sports, this might be the most upset I've been at a prediction right. But to your point, I mean, these have been the best two teams all season. They are the number 1 seed and the number 2 seed. The Liberty looking to win their first championship ever in the history of the franchise, and the Lynx looking to win their first championship since 2017, I believe it is. So it's been 7 years for the Lynx. It's been never for the Liberty. There's a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about. We're going to pick this apart from top to bottom, left to right. But before we do that, I do just want to acknowledge, because we've acknowledged it at least the past couple weeks on the show, a new player for Unrivaled has been announced, and unironically, it is Courtney Williams. Which is fun. Yet another unrivaled player going to be taking part in this finals. We might as well just call this the unrivaled finals at this point, with all the unrivaled players that are. Yeah,
and of course, with the two founders, of course, going head to head. Like it's literally the unrivaled. That is a big storyline here for sure, and that's one of the big matchups we definitely want to talk about. Two of the top players in the league. That's gonna be big. It's gonna be big for this series. I
saw someone on Twitter say that whoever wins this finals, that team should get the first pick in the finals draft between the fees. Whoever wins the final, just give them the first pick in the unrivaled draft.
I mean, I'm thinking the unrivaled team, and they've been doing such a great job with their rollout and their marketing and everything. I would have to assume that they have something up their sleeve to somehow capitalize or get some kind of plug or promo or something. There's got to be a plug there. I mean, this is almost too good to be true for them.
This actually has to be the perfect way for the WNBA season to end, to feed right into the unrivaled season, is to have the founders to have one of the founders winning the championship. Let's get right into it, because like Martin said, there is a lot to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and hit the intro.
No matter what it takes, we must protect our queen.
I mean, I just love playing the game. It's fun.
I'm reacting on what the defender does.
I hit them with a hezzy. After that, they quit.
Yeah, I think I've always just been able to get downhill. So
I know what I'm doing. Like, people can't tell me I'm not doing the right. Like, I've been taught the right way.
Exciting times, man.
Exciting times. As Martin, now you're Martin, I'm Marcus. As Martin alluded to at the top of the show, I did make the prediction that we would see these two teams face off in the finals of this season. Let's toss it back to that clip when the wonderful Lauren Mincy joined the show and asked us who we thought would be in the finals. Martin and I have talked about this. From a matchup standpoint, the Lynx are going to cause a lot of teams a lot of issues in the postseason.
Yeah, I don't want to see the Lynx.
And their versatility. This season is telling me that when the Liberty and the Lynx match up, the Lynx are going to win 75% of the time, according to the 4 games they played. So I'm going to say the Lynx are going to get it done, and I'm going to give Nafisa Collier Finals MVP.
You were on it, man. You were on it. Your prediction might hold. Anyone who's tapped in, who's watching live, make sure you tap in with us in the comments. Give us your finals prediction. We're about to really break down and chop up this WNBA Finals matchup. We're excited for it. Game 1 is tomorrow night. This show is usually on Tuesday nights, but we move things around. The last game in the Minnesota-Connecticut series was last night, so we wanted a chance to see who was going to go up against the Liberty in the finals. So we're here tonight, but of course we're usually here on Tuesday nights. But tap in with us in the comments if you're watching live, even if you're watching on the playback. Hit us in the comments with any thoughts or feedback. Yes, so Marcus, your prediction for who's in the finals held. I think your prediction for the winner and finals MVP
has changed.
Not to jump ahead too much, like as much momentum as both of these teams have, and I think each of them have a totally fair and even shot at winning. If I'm leaning toward one team right now, performance by performance from Nafisa Collier, I'm just becoming even more of a believer, and we're going to talk about the matchups in a little bit. And again, I think it could go either way. I think both teams are that great. There's a lot of context to both, but what are you feeling? Gut feeling right now? What's your instinct about your pick? You're still feeling confident about
I'm more confident that the Lynx are winning the championship now, as we sit about 24 hours before the game. For starters, a lot of it has to do with Nafisa Collier. We're going to talk about her in just a second, and all that she's doing. But mostly, it's a point that you made, and I don't know if it was where you had made a point that whoever came out from that series, whether it was Minnesota or Connecticut, would be more battle tested because those are the 2 most physical teams in the league. And I just feel like the Lynx are more ready to be in this moment, and they're more ready to win a championship than the Liberty. It doesn't mean I don't think the Liberty are a good basketball team or even on the caliber of a championship team, because of course they are. But when you look at the 2 teams that the Lynx had to play, the Liberty had a cakewalk to even get to the semifinals. No disrespect to the Atlanta Dream, but like they dog walked the Atlanta Dream in both games. It wasn't even really a competition, I'll be honest. Atlanta did try to make it a little bit competitive for like the first 20 minutes of game 2 in the first half, but after that, it was off to the races and they punched their ticket. Same thing with Vegas, right? Like Vegas was able to steal a game to avoid the sweep in game 3, but when you look at the series overall, that wasn't really a contest. Like the Liberty were up significantly on the Las Vegas Aces, the 2-time defending champions, quite easily in all 4 of those games. So whereas for the Lynx, they looked great against the Mercury. I know that they swept the Mercury, but remember in game 2, the Lynx had to fight back from down like 16, 17, 18 something points like that to come back and get the win. I think that was the largest comeback win to that point for them all season. And then, of course, they go all 5 games against the Sun. Like, I'm more confident that the Lynx are going to win this series now than I was when I made the pick when Lauren asked this a couple weeks ago. I just think they're more ready. I think they've gone through more. They've had to really figure things out, and they've been put in much more tough positions. The Liberty are, I think, in for a rude awakening on game 1, I think.
Interesting. I'm more and more a believer in Minnesota. Where I might disagree with you, and we're going to find out, is, and somehow you are underestimating the value of, and maybe it's the fan coming out in you. Maybe you might have a little spite in your take here. I'm gonna take it at face value and just trust that you're giving me wholehearted basketball opinion here. But I think we're going to see and find out, because I slightly agree with you. I feel like Minnesota's ready. I do think that Connecticut series tested them. And But I think that New York beating Vegas was huge for them. And I'm really looking for kind of one or two things. Like, I don't think New York is going to come out complacent. I don't think they're satisfied. They don't have the mentality that they've won something. But it was a huge get over the hump moment for Sabrina, for Stewie, for that franchise, for any franchise to beat the Aces this year was going to be a huge moment. But the fact that it was New York to take them out in the semifinals after losing to them in the finals last year, and even to, the Kelsey Plum comments, Stewie said she kept receipts, like that was big for their confidence. Now, again, I don't think the Liberty are of the mindset that they're satisfied at all, but we do have to watch to see if after you beat the bet, I'm not to say Vegas was the best team in the league, but they're the two-time defending champs, and it takes a certain amount of confidence and conviction to go out there and still beat them. Like in game 3, bro, Vegas, I mean, they didn't just beat them. Sabrina had 4 points. She barely even got shot. Not only did she miss shots, she barely got shots off. They got back to like, yo, we can turn this on when, not when we feel like it, but like we still have the ability to turn this on.
Yep.
And maybe they did lose a little bit of their edge, the Aces, like Becky Hammond had talked about. And I think I did see that at moments through the series. And yeah, that you're right. At many times, especially in the first two games, the Liberty were really kicking their butts. Like it really wasn't. The Liberty looked like flat out just the better team. People thought Vegas was going to might get swept because it just looked like the Liberty were just that much better. It just looked like they had it. It was their time. Becky Hammond, after game 2, was saying, like, referencing the 2014 Spurs Heat series, just saying like it might be their time, essentially. The way they lost to us last year, it might be their time. So I just think you have to watch for how confident the Liberty come out after having taken down the Las Vegas Aces. I just think we've seen a different Sabrina all year. She had the one game slip up again in game 3 when Vegas really jumped on her, but then she came back and got it right back in game 4, hitting big shots and getting to the basket, turning corners. Like, they responded, the Liberty did. So that's what I'm watching for first, because I think either the Liberty may be in for a rude awakening. And the only way I think that might be true is because Minnesota is so similar to them in that they're structured, they're disciplined, they're talented, they move the ball. Like, there's a lot of similarities between these two teams, offensively and defensively. So I think it's possible that New York's in for a rude awakening only because they're going up against a team that's very much like them. They're going to have to tighten up and be really sharp, like they were against Vegas, but Minnesota's just kind of like a different kind of animal. So that's where I slightly push back and maybe disagree, because I do want to watch to see that. Like I expect them. I think New York, having just beat Vegas, that I just think that was a huge moment for them, and their confidence should be through the roof. Not only that, Minnesota's beaten them in the series. They beat them in the Commissioner's Cup this year. Stewie's talking about receipts. You don't think that's one of them? I think that they're coming out with that. They're going to try to come out with that same fire and edge, like they have something to prove, because they still do. They still need to win it. They were in the finals last year. You can't show up thinking like, oh, we've been here before. Like, no. Now you have to prove that you're the top dog. Minnesota wasn't here last year. You were. You just took out Vegas, the team that's won the last 2 years. So just off the bat, I'm just looking for that kind of like who's coming out with really that confidence carrying over from the last series. And I just think after having beaten Vegas, New York should have a ton of confidence coming out.
You're right. I do think that New York should have more confidence considering the team that they beat to get to this point. Obviously, when you beat not just the team that not just team that beat you in the finals the previous season, but a team that has won, as you mentioned, the last 2 championships in the league, like that obviously means a lot. It's just there's something about the Minnesota Lynx having gone through what they had to go through in this most recent series to get here that just makes me feel like they're more ready. Like we talked about before the Sun series, and I think you mentioned how this matchup between Nafisa Collier and Alyssa Thomas, when we talked on Friday before I left, that was going to be the toughest matchup that Nafisa was going to have at any point in the postseason, just because of how physical of a basketball player Alyssa Thomas is. taking nothing away from Breonna Stewart, obviously, because I think that Breonna Stewart's still the second best player. She might be the third best player in the league, given the body of work that Fee has put together this season. But she's not the caliber of defender, and she's not as physical as an Alyssa Thomas is, right? And you can go across the board for all the players that matter in Minnesota. I don't know if there's anyone individually or collectively that is going to cause bigger matchup issues and cause bigger challenges for Minnesota than Connecticut. So it's for me, it's my confidence in Minnesota is less. It really has nothing to do with the Liberty per se, because you're right. The Liberty should be on cloud nine. The Liberty are not going to be complacent. I don't think the Liberty are going to show up as if they've arrived or anything like that. And they have gotten over the proverbial hump. And I do think that this is going to be probably the best series we've seen all year. But just looking at the road for Minnesota to get here, and more specifically, the road for Nafisa Collier to get here and how she got consistently better. Like, she went from having an all-time great 2 games against Phoenix in the first round to having a struggle a bit, but still having one of the best, semifinals performances we've seen. So much so that she right now averaging a little over 27 points per game. That's the most points per game a defensive player of the year has averaged entering the finals in WNBA history. And it's the 4th most points all time any player has averaged entering the finals. So like, she's kicked it into that next gear, so much so that people on Twitter are talking about whether or not Nafisa Collier is the most all-around player in the WNBA based on just the body of work that we've seen, because she's not just getting shots and making it look easy, but she's crashing the board. She's playing good defense, and she's 6'1", averaging like 25 and 12, and still getting 2 or 3 steals every now and then. Like, I just feel like, and again, we'll start to dissect a little bit more in just a second, but my confidence in Minnesota is just they got here the hard way. I feel like just focusing simply on the teams that they had to face to get here. I feel like they got it the hard way, and that matters when you have to go up against a team that it's not going to be an easy out. Like, they're going to have to dig deeper to get there, because this is a team that has now been in the finals for back-to-back seasons, and this Minnesota team is relatively new here. Like, this isn't the Minnesota team of 7 years ago that seemingly lived in the WNBA Finals, right? Like, the road to get here was a long one. It was an arduous one. This is a team that was booted out of the first round by the Connecticut Sun last season. So even they got a little bit of revenge in their own right, not to the level of the Liberty over the Aces, obviously, but there's a lot to like for me. There's a lot to like about Minnesota and why I think that they'll get it done. And we'll talk about it in just a second.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's the 27 points to games. Also, I saw the second highest point average of any player in the playoffs in WNBA history. I don't know who has the first, but 27 points a game is the second highest. Nafisa also has the record now for most consecutive playoff games with at least 25 points and 10 rebounds, 3 straight games, and that's a WNBA record. Yep. So she's having a dominant and frankly one of the most dominant playoff runs that we've seen. Yep. I give you Connecticut. I don't know if I'm giving you Phoenix. They basically dog walked Phoenix. I mean, for the most part, like I don't know if I can give you that. Like, we had them as kind of a dark horse coming in, but they were clearly outmatched. I give you Connecticut. I give you that they're battle tested. What I will say is that New York, and why I'm so excited for how even these teams are, is because both teams are elite on both ends of the floor. And this is the first team, like Connecticut's elite defensively. They got a little better offensively because they got Marina Mabry, and Ty Harris came back in that series. I think that kind of made things a little funky for them with the rotation, like just with her. I mean, she looked great. She came out and looked great. I was glad that she got to get back out there, but
looked like there was something.
Offensively, they were still figuring things out. Offensively, they really looked lost a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
But we know what Connecticut, does and is defensively, even though Minnesota was shooting a high percentage on them and at times, especially in that last game, kind of doing whatever they wanted when they were really in motion. I mean, they had games where they scored 90 points against Connecticut. So as great of a defense as they are, Minnesota still found holes and was still able to attack them in different ways. So, but again, I will say New York is the best offensive team mixed with defensive team that they're going to face by far. I mean, the two of them they're the best teams that either of them have seen up to this point. And I think they've both been tested from the last round. New York with Vegas and Minnesota with Connecticut. And that's what I'm looking for, to see who's coming in with like the most confidence. And I think, the first thing we're talking about is like the two best players and how important that's going to be for this series, because I think it's going to be huge.
So let's jump right into that. Before we want to do that, just quick shout out to XL who's tapped in with us. We appreciate it. Anyone else who's tapped in with us live, feel free to hop in the comments. We want to join in the conversation as well. Let's toss it. Shout out Dr. Doom. Let's toss it to a clip of Martin Zori's talking about Nafisa Collier's scoring before we jump into the Nafisa Stewie matchup.
Even if you're watching the games and how Nafisa scores, it's similar to Asia. It's very simple. Like, it's not like they're giving her the ball, like get us a bucket. She can do that, but a lot of it is out of two-man game, pick and roll, offensive rebounds, good cutting, right? She's just a great basketball player, great awareness, knows where to be, runs the floor, good hands, good, like, and having those things can help you get 40 if you're inclined to like go after it and score. Like, most of her points are layups. Like, it's not, if you watch her highlights, you're not seeing a whole lot of like, creative fancy stuff. It's good movement, good cutting, a lot of layups, shooting the shot when she's open. Like, it's not anything too crazy. So I want to start by clarifying even where I said there at the beginning how it's similar to Asia. I wasn't obviously saying I wasn't saying that the way she scores is similar to Asia. I was saying that it was similar in that how they do their scoring is pretty simple. Nafisa is more of a dual forward. Asia is more of a hybrid post power forward, more of a legitimate four. Nafisa does a little more on the perimeter, goes off the dribble a little bit more, I think. And I think has a little more, I mean, I think there are similarities to them, but I think Nafisa has a little bit more of like a wing guard component to her. And even in her back to the basket game, Asia's a little bit more of a traditional post player. She's more of a post, more of a four than Nafisa, in my opinion. So I would put Asia in the hybrid post power forward, position category. Nafisa more of a dual forward. But I was really talking about how similar it is that they both get it through so simply. And honestly, I think that's a kind of a backdrop for this series, bro, for people who get to watch this basketball. Again, these were the two best passing teams all year, the two teams at the highest offensive rating, the two teams who were just the best basketball teams all around. Like, you have talent, but also like the unselfishness, the balance, the passing, the way that they get their baskets, the 3-point shooting, and the way they play. I just think people are really going to be in store for like, and look, I mean, starting right here with the two best players, like, these are two really special talents. And just like a quick thought on Nafisa to carry over from that scoring kind of thought I had about her, like as a scorer, because I feel like I've been watching Nafisa and really like just feeling out her game more. Like, this is the most I've been able to really watch her and observe and like really get a feel for like why she's so great. Like, she's putting up 40 in the playoffs. It's like, you should sit down and take a look and see, okay, how is this girl doing this? Like, what makes her special? One thing I'll say, bro, is that, and you mentioned Nafisa 6'1", but she really plays like 6'3". She plays she's 6'3", and her wingspan's probably around like 6'3" to 6'5", honestly. So she's able to play bigger than what she's listed as. I think that Nafisa Collier's motor is not being talked about enough. And I think it's because she's not as outspoken and celebrating and yelling or stomping or doing the things that other people with a little more personality do when they're playing and when they're dominating. She'll give you a little scream here and there. Like, you can see the competitiveness in her body language after an and one, or she'll get physical, she'll get chippy and stuff. But she keeps it so calm and cool while with this like high motor. Because when you look at her crash the boards, when you look at her flash and cut across the lane when they find her and she gets the ball, and she looks like she goes into a mode where you really can't stop her, between her strength and then her touch as a shot maker. Like, even when I talked about her scoring and how it's so simple. I don't want that to make it sound like I'm not acknowledging how super skilled the woman is. The way she's getting her buckets, like I said, as I'm getting to know her game more and how she is so great at scoring the ball and being in spots and really just being unstoppable, her cutting, her awareness of the floor, it's all skill. I mean, her IQ is really up there, and I think that trickles into even the identity of their team. But it's really special the way she does it, because she's become a high-level scorer. She's having one of the most dominant runs in playoff history. And again, like I said in the clip, she's not doing anything too crazy. Most of it is within the confine, within the offense. Like, she's not ad-libbing or going off script too much. She's not going one-on-one a whole lot. She can when she needs to. But I think it's just such a really special combination of high-level skill, of motor, which, like I said, I don't think people are really talking about enough, because when you watch her, you're seeing someone who's really going super hard, and it may not seem or feel like it because she's not celebrating and pumping her chest and yelling a whole lot, but it's there, and it's why people can't stop her. It's why Alyssa Thomas was having fits in the last series. Nafisa shot 63% in that series with Alyssa Thomas as the primary defender. That's insane for someone to be like. The more at game by game, I saw Nafisa Collier getting more comfortable with that matchup and doing more of what she wanted to do with Alyssa Thomas, with just footwork, stepping through, shooting over the top, like shooting touch, understanding of space, angles. It's all there, bro. It's really tough. And when you watch it, you may not think it's like too crazy, but it's really special, man. It's really special what she's doing and how she does it.
I think I think the Nafisa Collier matchup defensively for Breanna Stewart is going to be probably a more difficult matchup for Stewie than an Asia Wilson matchup was this year, or what it was in the finals last year. And a lot of it has to do primarily with the fact that Nafisa Collier affects the game in more ways, I think, than Asia, like it offensively, right? So we talked about maybe a month or two ago, Asia, how insane it is, right, that Asia Wilson at her position, with the way that she plays basketball, being considered the best scorer in the league, right? Taking nothing away from that. And I'm not saying that Nafisa is a better scorer than Asia, because I don't think that. But to your point, when you look at the way that Nafisa gets hers, right, they're one of the biggest differences in Nafisa's game compared to Asia's game is the fact that Nafisa will hit shots from three more reliably and more consistently than an Asia Wilson is, which means that Breanna Stewart, in turn, is going to be spending more time playing defense out in the perimeter than she would if she were guarding someone like Asia Wilson, which in the grand scheme of things, from a defensive matchup standpoint, because as you mentioned, these have been the two best defenses all season, relatively speaking, right? Stewie's going to have to exert more energy on the defensive side of the ball, I think, which could play to the Liberty's disadvantage in that route, right? If Stewie's if Stewie's going to be the primary defender on Nafisa, which I think she should be, right? That is going
at times, but I think they're going to roam her a good amount.
You think so?
Like, even in the last series, we saw them throw her on Kelsey Plum. Like, Stewie's versatility and range as a defender. Yeah. She's got Jonquel Jones to back her up. I mean, listen, that's a tough matchup for anybody. That's going to be even tougher as far as guarding Nafisa Collier, even tougher for Jonquel. It's one of my big question marks for the Liberty with matching up with the Lynx, is I just think their forwards and their front court have a little more agility and mobility, where Jonquel is really going to have to be locked in and alert, because Alana Smith can step out behind the line. She can hit that three from behind the line. So she can pull Jonquel out. But Breanna does have Jonquel, just like how we would talk about in the Aces series, where it's between Stewie, Jonquel to like gang up on Asia together. It can't be one or the other. Like, in certain moments, yeah, primary defender, primary matchup. But I do think, and again, you can't just put anybody on Nafisa, but hey, Leonie Fiebich is 6'3". I mean, Benaja and Lainey Hamilton, is not, is small. Like, she can guard bigger players. So
yeah,
I think the Liberty will try to switch things up, especially with Stewie being secondary defender to be able to wall up on the feast a lot. So I that's, even for the reasons you were getting into, as far as like, you don't want to wear last 3 minutes of the game, clutch moments maybe, yeah, but like throughout the game, I think we're going to see a lot.
Yeah, no, and that speaks to. I mean, we'll see the same thing. I think even on the other side, I'll say reasons, because both of these teams are very versatile and have the switchability on defense. But just when we do see those moments, when it is Stewie and Nafisa that cause some issues in a way that we don't typically see those types of issues for Stewie defensively, because she's long, because she's a slight. That is something I'm especially going to be looking out for, because Nafisa has the ability to stretch the floor and pull Stewie out. The longest defender that Nafisa has had to see this entire postseason as well, like consistently, even with all the switching and things. Alyssa Thomas was obviously a defender in the league. Like, now that's not to say that she's going to be shooting upwards of 60% on Breonna Stewart, because Nafisa's some trouble. I just am interested to see when we do have those moments when it is just Stewie and it is just Nafisa. When, like you talked about, when we talk about one of your shot, when they need that shot, right? In those moments, when the Lynx need a shot down the stretch, either to ice the game or to keep the game close, and the ball is in Nafisa's hands, we know that Breonna Stewart excels in those moments defensively. It's going to be interesting. That's what's going to make it interesting, because she has more. Asia Wilson does. We know Asia Wilson can go get you a shot down the stretch when you need one. Obviously, because you kind of know where it's coming from, right? Like, there's only so many ways to being able to hit a shot from all three levels. That adds another component of that when you need, that big shot down the stretch to ice the game or keep it close. And that's the part, to me, that's going to be get the job done. These games, the offense, because I think offensively they're going to cancel each other out. Like, Nafisa is good for 25, and we know in these moments, Breonna Stewart can be good for 20 to 25 points in all these games.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I do totally agree with that. And I think, like, for me, and I do look forward to seeing them match up, like, head to head. I mean, I help but think that, and it kind of goes without saying, playing, it's interesting, like, as you compare, like, Nafisa to Asia and, like, the Lynx to the Aces, the biggest difference, I don't even want to say they run their, they have been running their offense through Nafisa through the playoffs. I mean, they've made it, I feel like they've made her more and more right now. The offense is going through her more, but you have more of a balanced attack, little more ball movement action with Minnesota, whereas Vegas, you have these lot of talented players, so that kind of comes with it. But it's just interesting, that contrast, because when you look at it that way, that's the big difference, is that Minnesota has more of that balanced ball movement. Everybody touches it. Anybody, everybody gets shot style. But then when it's time to get Nafisa the ball, they get Nafisa the ball, especially the way that she's playing right now. But I do think the nature of this series is going to be dictated by Stewie and Nafisa, how well they're playing and who is going to be the more dominant force. Stewie came out in game 1 against Vegas and just totally dominated them.
She did.
Which one of them is going to come out and say no? Because look, you kind of alluded to it. And look, this is the reality. It's a real conversation to have. And I think people should be having this conversation after we see who wins this finals matchup, who's the finals MVP, etc. There should be a conversation after this of who is the best player in the world. A'ja Wilson had a historic season, and she has the best player in the league, she has that mantle right now. But after we have a new champion and a new finals MVP, and depending on how Nafisa or how Stewie goes about their business in this, there should be a viable conversation after this based on what we're about to see about who's the best player in the world. Because we came into the semifinals, I thought, with, arguably, in terms of impact, and it just made, even you look at the 4 teams, you had whether you say the 4 best or the 4 most versatile, probably you could say the 4 most versatile players in the WNBA. Alyssa Thomas, Nafisa, A'ja, and Stewie.
I would say those were the 4 best players,
right?
Yeah.
And you could you could argue those are the 4 best players in the league. So not to just flat out say whoever was going to win this is now the best player in the league. It's about how they do it. But, to your point, you brought it up. People should be talking about Nafisa as possibly the best scorer. Like when you have a run like this, and then if you win, those are the conversations that start happening. That's why this matchup is huge, because either one of them could come out of this with an argument as, okay, they're the best player in the league now. And I know A'ja Wilson people might get upset about that, and understandably so, but I'm just saying that's when conversations should start to happen. That's what happens year to year. New winner, new top dog, new finals MVP, like a new conversation starts to happen.
It might be my bias, so I'll have to sit on it and think and come back with a better answer in a couple weeks. But I would venture 100% simply because of the way that Nafisa Collier's been playing. Nafisa Collier's run, before we get into the next matchup that we're going to break down, Nafisa Collier's run in this postseason is reminding me a lot of Giannis's 2021 run to the finals. Because the only difference is obviously Giannis had like accolades to his name prior to getting to that finals, right? Nafisa obviously having won Defensive Player of the Year, but Giannis had like 2 MVPs and I think a Defensive Player of the Year or 2 before that season. But Giannis entering that season, it was all about like, we know what he is in the regular season, but can he finally get over that hump in the postseason, right? And he went on a run unlike many that we've seen in the history of the NBA to win that championship. Like, I would say in my lifetime anyway, because I'm only 21 years old, like the only player I can think of that would have had a more dominant run than that 2021 run for Giannis would be, any of LeBron's runs in the playoffs, because that's just how great he was. But at the end of that finals, that conversation was had of, is Giannis officially now the best player in the world? Because the one thing he was missing was the championship. The way that Nafisa Collier's been playing, averaging almost 40 points in the first round, being the first player to get 25 and 10 in 3 consecutive games, shooting 63% on arguably the most physical defender in the league in Alyssa Thomas, right? Dominating everything to this point. If Nafisa Collier continues this, if she continues to be a 25 and 10 player through the course of this finals, if she wins this matchup against Stewie, leads this team to a championship, a team that 2 years ago had a losing record and a team last year had a losing record and still stuck into the playoffs, thinking about all of that and thinking about the player that is Nafisa Collier now, if the Lynx do in fact win the championship,
no super team. That's like
no,
a Giannis
no
too,
super team,
Giannis,
which is
like
another thing. It's all organic.
No one's accusing them of being a super team.
If Nafisa Collier gets it done, Nafisa Collier, I think, 100% will have jumped over Stewie in that conversation.
Okay.
And I think you have to have a conversation about whether or not she's at least on the same playing field as A'ja. Because, and this is another feather in her cap before we move on to Sabrina and Courtney Williams, there's one player that we said, if not for A'ja Wilson's historic season, would have been the MVP this year.
Right.
And that's Nafisa Collier.
Yeah.
Which means that Nafisa Collier, if not for A'ja Wilson, would have been the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year this season. Martin Sories, who's the last player to win MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in the same season? It was A'ja Wilson.
A'ja Wilson, right.
So if that's the type of season that Nafisa Collier has put together, you cap that off with a championship against the Liberty, against Breanna Stewart as her primary matchup, just like Asia did last season, winning Finals MVP, just like Asia did last season, clearly being effective on both sides of the ball, as we know Asia is, impacting winning on both sides of the ball, as Asia is. I don't know if that means that Nafisa is definitively better than Asia. I think we would have to see them head up in a series and her outplay Asia for that to be the case. But she 100%, this body of work this season puts her as probably the only player in the WNBA that has a legitimate argument to say, if Asia Wilson's sitting at the head of the table, I consider that seat on her right hand, and I can have a legitimate spot and have a legitimate say at sitting at that right-hand side of Asia Wilson and the overall pantheon of who's the best player in the WNBA. That's how good Nafisa Collier was this season, and that's how great Nafisa Collier has been this postseason. I think this is huge for her.
It's opening a lot of eyes. Like, she's going to put a lot of people on. She has already, but if she goes on to finish this thing and beat the Liberty, because the Liberty are people want to see the Liberty win. I think they're the more kind of like, famous, popular team. They got Spike Lee at the games now, Sabrina and Stewie. I think people are still learning Nafisa Collier's name.
Yep.
And last quick thing on her, she's almost at 50, 40, 90 right now. Like, think about what's even going on top of all the stats we already said. She's shooting 56% on twos, 45% on threes, and 88% from the free throw line in the playoffs.
Out of her mind.
And again, watching her, all you see is efficiency, motor, skill, and IQ. Like, this is what makes the WNBA women's basketball so fire. This is what people like us and so many talk about when you talk about the beautiful fundamentals, the elite fundamentals and IQ of the kind of basketball that you see from the top players in this league. Yeah, we've got creative players. There's sauce, there's all kinds of different styles. Like, we've got it all. But at the crux of it is really just high level fundamentals: cutting, passing, finishing, shooting touch, spatial awareness. Like, all the beautiful, wonderful IQ things in basketball are on display in the top players in the league right now. Nafisa, I think, is like the poster child for that, because when you watch her, I just feel like, I don't think people feel like they're seeing anything crazy, and they're not. It's just high level basketball with high IQ and high skill and high motor. And it can't be stopped. They haven't been able to stop her. Alyssa Thomas was throwing her hands up in that series. She was fed up. Like, I'd never seen her like that. She was totally frustrated because she was getting beat. Teammates are getting beat on the backside. She's like, yo, how was she slipping and just getting late? How was it? Like, she turns around. It's like, bro, it's just a layup, just open. Like, it's crazy, man. And it's Nafisa, and it's that team. That team is connected right now.
They are connected. Real quick, before we move on to the next topic, I want to thank everyone that's watching with us live, listening with us live. Please, be sure to tap in with the comments. Let's move on to another matchup, one that is particularly interesting to me, and it's something that we talked about a bit before the show. It's the matchup between Courtney Williams and Sabrina Ionescu. Sabrina, as I've said a couple of times in the past couple of weeks, answered your call, right? At the top of the season, when we previewed the show, or when we previewed the year, you called out Sabrina Ionescu. You said she needed to have a big season, and she did. She had a fantastic season. She was comfortably in the MVP race, before the Olympic and the All-Star break. Continued that into post All-Star break, and obviously has been a big reason why the Liberty are in the finals for the second consecutive season. Big reason why, obviously, they were able to knock off the Aces in the last round. And then you have Courtney Williams, who, I told you, when I went to and I got to see her with my own two eyes for the first time when the Lynx were here and they played the Mystics, I texted you. I said, bro, like, I didn't know Courtney Williams was like this, right? Like, familiar with Courtney Williams' game, familiar with what she brings to the table, but I got to watch her play basketball for the first time with my own two eyes in person. And it's different. I will say it's different watching basketball in person in the media box than it is on my couch just watching the TV. You get to see a lot more things in person. But this matchup is particularly interesting to me because, as you mentioned in our messages, Courtney Williams is not at all the caliber defender of a Jackie Young or other guards in Vegas that was giving Sabrina fits in Game 3 of this season, also in the finals last season. But if there's any hope to slow down Sabrina Ionescu and mitigate her offensive attack, that hope lies in Courtney Williams' defense. That, to me, is what makes this interesting. Like, Courtney Williams is the other night I said she was their best perimeter defender. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, she's probably not their best perimeter defender. You would probably say that's Nafisa just because of how versatile she is as a defender. But if she's not their best perimeter defender, she's definitely their second. And so again, we talk about versatility. We talk about the switching. There's probably going to be some switching going on, but primarily I expect Courtney Williams to be on Sabrina Ionescu, and she has to find a way to do to Sabrina what the Aces were able to do to Sabrina in game 3, which is keep her quiet and keep her as quiet and non-impactful as possible. Because to me, I really think that's the key, right? If you look back at that Aces series last year, the one thing that we noticed is Breanna Stewart had to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Jonquel Jones didn't really have the impact that we thought she would have in that series. Sabrina Ionescu certainly didn't have the impact that we thought she would have in that series. And both of those things together played a big part in why the Aces were able to get the job done, outside of the fact that they were just the better team. Courtney Williams, I think, is going to have to play the best defense of her career in this series to mitigate Sabrina Ionescu, because the Sabrina Ionescu we've seen this season is light years better and offensively and light years more impactful than the Sabrina Ionescu we saw at the end around this time last year. And so that's the key for me. I'm not really concerned about this from an offensive standpoint because they don't actually do the same things offensively. Like Sabrina is more of a threat from deep. Courtney Williams, most of her game is from the mid-range. Courtney Williams, I would say, is the better playmaker, but defensively, Courtney Williams has to lock in on defense and slow down Sabrina as best as she can, because then you're going to have a situation where now the Liberty are going to have to be looking a lot more to Stewie and a lot more to Jonquel Jones to get the job done. And I think that limits the Liberty's offense immensely if Sabrina Ionescu is not clicking on all cylinders the way that she has been all season.
Yeah, I think you're like spot on at looking at this matchup. I think when it comes to Sabrina, I don't think the Liberty win unless she gets on some kind of heater. And I do feel, going back to what I said about the Liberty having more confidence in this series, having beaten Vegas. I think the number one person that applies to is Sabrina, because she was the main person they were going after last year. I mean, literally like taking turns going at her, whoever she's guarding, give them the ball and expose her because she just couldn't stay in front of people. Yeah. And then hound her when she has the basketball because she wasn't comfortable with her handle. Now, apparently Sabrina just really had to get healthy. Apparently she hasn't really been all the way like physically healthy. That's been part of what, just hearing her and reading things and finding out more about like how she's looked and how she's moved. Apparently this is like the healthiest she's been in years. But she has obviously taken her game to another level, just when like literally just the simple things of like keeping her dribble when she gets below the free throw line. She brought her floater game really back into play. Like she's just doing more 3-level scoring things as a guard, way more comfortable with the ball in her hands, doesn't look as intimidated by, guards that are quicker than her, shiftier than her, more athletic than her. I can't help but think that Sabrina getting over the hump of beating the Aces guards. Again, she had the one slip up in game 3 where she kind of reverted back to how she looked last year, but then she came right back out in game 4 like she looked in the first 2 games, where she was really just handling them, turning the corner, finding openings. I think the Aces almost underestimated her a little bit and tried to treat her like she would. They tried to intimidate her. Tiff Hayes is a bully. I'm sorry, bro. Tiff Hayes is a bully out there, bro. And she was still trying to bully Sabrina, and Sabrina got through it. She pushed through it. It looked like a totally different situation. She really wasn't having it. And she found a way to play well as a result. So, I mean, I just can't help but look at going in. I feel like this should be a favorable matchup for Sabrina. I look for her to come out and really shoot the ball and be aggressive early. She's going to get tons of ball screens. She's one of the players who get the most ball screens on any team in the league. Jonquel is going to be setting a lot of screens on Courtney Williams, and she's not as girthy, and Jonquel is going to get her up out of the way. Then you've got bigs having to hedge on Sabrina. You've got Jonquel in the short roll. Now she can get it and look to make plays there. So that's where both teams, I'm telling you, the passing game is going to determine this series. not just the talent, the individual. Obviously, I said the best players, Stewie and Fee, they set the tone. But as far as the units, the passing game and the defensive rotations are going to determine the series, because these are two teams that are both very sharp with their ball movement and very sharp with their defensive rotations. So when since they both do both well, I expect both of them to really try to be sharp and stop the other team from getting that ball moving the way that they know they like to.
And those are great points. And I didn't even think much about even the Sabrina Ionescu defensive standpoint. I honestly completely slipped my mind, because I do think, again, going back to the initial conversation about if someone needs a shot, like we know that Courtney Williams can, get the ball where she needs to get it and make a tough shot. And that is also going to be a component of this as well, is will Sabrina have enough defensive awareness? Because she's not a great defender by any stretch of the imagination. I wouldn't even go as far to say she's even like a good defender. If
she's gotten better.
She's gotten better. She's
because even
defensively,
she stayed in Kelsey. She stayed in front of Kelsey Plum much better.
She did.
Again, the one game they were going at her, and it looked like she reverted a little bit. But but overall, she's better. She
has gotten better. Like her game
there.
all around has better. But I still don't know if I would label her as I'll say like a defender to worry about. I'll put it that way, I guess, right? So like in those moments, we still know that Courtney Williams can get to her spots and get that mid-range shot wherever it is. And so that's another component of it. But again, like,
and that's where, and sorry to cut you off, that's where they can put Stewie on. Like I said, you saw it in the Vegas series. They'll put Stewie on a guard just for her length, take away drives, take away passing angles. Like that's what I'm looking for. That's where I think you put Stewie, like with those kind of versatile defenders, you can roam them. And I think we've seen Sandy Brondello a little more loose with like roaming Stewie onto guards and changing matchups than we've seen Cheryl Reeve do with Nafisa. We know Nafisa can do that as well, but I don't think they're as loose with like roaming her on different defenders. That's something I'm really watching for.
It'll be interesting. I think, again, the similarities of this team are so jarring. These are the two teams that led the league in assists per game. These are two of the best defenses in the league by any stretch of the imagination, whether it's offensive rating, whether it's defensive rating. They play very similar styles of basketball. This is 100% of all the possible finals matchups we could have gotten coming into the postseason. I don't think there was one better than this one, not just from a similarity point, but also just because these have been the two best teams in the league from day one.
Get this. I saw this earlier. Last season, the New York Liberty broke the WNBA record for highest percentage of their points being assisted on. 75% of their points last season were assisted on. WNBA record. The Lynx broke that record this season. 76% of their points were assisted on. That's all you need to know about these two. These are I'm telling you, the passing game is going to determine this series. Which team is sharper, taking away the short roll passes, the backdoor cuts, the easy baskets, the ball movement, the transition looks. Like both teams have to be really sharp, because both teams are really sharp offensively, and they will move that ball, and they have different players who can make shots, who can make plays, and they're both super balanced. So on both ways, I'm telling you, I feel like we're going to see really high level basketball.
If anyone thinks that there's no elite women's basketball, there's no elite basketball being played on the women's side, you're in for a rude awakening for this series, 100%. Before we get into our finals predictions, Martin Sories, real quick, let's talk X Factors. Give me your championship X Factors for the Lynx and your championship X Factor for the Liberty.
I think my X Factor for the Lynx is going to be Bridget Carlton. The last game that these two teams played a month ago, where the Lynx won in New York, Bridget Carlton had like 18 points. 15 of her points came from three. She hit 5 threes. She made a ton of shots in that game, and I think she is a difference maker for them. I think they will need her shot making. I think they will need her on the wing, Kayla McBride as well. But I think Bridget Carlton, offensively and defensively, she may need to help out with Stewie a little bit, but when you look at the versatility, the range, and the length, and like I said, the mobility and agility of that front line, Bridget Carlton, Nafisa Collier, Elena Smith, that's what I think defines the Lynx, and where I think they can get somewhat of an advantage on the Liberty's front court, where I think on their side, for me, the X factor is Jonquel Jones. I saw the stat earlier. the Liberty they've only lost since Jonquel Jones has joined the team. When she gets a double-double, the team is 31-3. In the regular season, they're 24-0. In the playoffs, they're 7-3. So total in 34 games, 31-3 when Jonquel gets a double-double. And I think this matchup, I think she could wear out Alana Smith. I think it could go either way. That's a huge matchup on both sides there at the 5. But I think Jonquel is going to be the key to, if she can overpower Alana Smith and be just too much for her, because she can stretch it too and cut and shoot behind the 3-point line. Jonquel can do it all as well. And I think physically she can kind of wear on her. But I think Alana Smith with her mobility could give Jonquel some problems. But I think if we're seeing Jonquel get double-doubles, be physical, be active, be dominant, and be too much for Minnesota inside, where I think she does have a physical advantage, I think that can be the X factor for the Liberty.
For me, my X factor for the Liberty is Leonie Fabic. First of all, she burst onto the scene in the first game of the postseason. She had I think she had 21 points. She hit all 4 of her threes, which is a WNBA record. Most points in a debut, which is also a WNBA record. She's going to be the key for me because from what it looks like she's earned her permanent spot in the rotation as a starter, and I think that makes perfect sense from a defensive standpoint, from a length standpoint. We've been talking all night about the switchability and the versatility of both of these teams, but also from a shot making standpoint, you can't leave her open because you know that she's going to hit those shots. And that can be the difference when you have moments where I don't know if the Lynx are ever going to fully blitz Sabrina the way that the Aces did in game 3, but I can't completely count it out. And if the Lynx are going to be blitzing Sabrina, if they're going to be drawing a lot of attention to Sabrina and Stewie and Jonquel to limit those 3, then Fabic is going to have a lot of wide open shots, and she's going to have to hit those shots. And she's shown us that she can. So I certainly think that she can be an X factor for the Liberty. For the Lynx, it's tough because, as you said to me in our text messages we were talking about the show, it feels like everyone that's not the big 3 on this team is an X factor in their own way. For me, I'm going to say it's Alana Smith. The first time these two teams matched up way back in May, she had 15 points. She was a big reason why they won that game. She hasn't quite played at that level in the other 3 matchups that these two teams had against each other throughout the course of the season, including the Commissioner's Cup. But we know that she can do it. We know that she can hit big shots. She hit countless big shots in the game against the Sun to close out. She hit a couple big shots even against the Mercury as well. We know that's what she's capable of, and she can crash the boards. And to your point earlier about the Jonquel Jones component, she can also force Jonquel Jones to step out and have to guard the perimeter as well, which can leave open space for driving lanes, whether it's for Nafisa, whether it's for McBride, whether it's for Courtney Williams or whoever. So I have my eye on her because I know that she can hit big shots. And similar to Fabic, she might need to hit a couple big shots down the stretch of these games. Like I said, neither of these teams are blowing out the other. I would be shocked if either of these teams win a game by more than 10 points. Something would have to go drastically wrong for either of these teams to lose a game by more than 10 points. I think they're just that good. I think this matchup is just that similar, where it's going to be hard for either team to really get a stranglehold and just dominate one or the other the way that we saw them do to the other 4 teams that they've had to play to get here. And so we're going to need some unsung heroes to win a championship. And for the Liberty, I think it's going to be Fabic. If they want to win this chip, she's going to have to be an unsung hero. And for the Lynx, it's going to have to be Alana Smith. With all that said, game tips off tomorrow. First game of the finals tips off tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Give me your finals prediction, your winner, how many games, and your MVP of the finals this year.
I think I'm riding with your initial prediction, man. I'm going with my gut right now is feeling like Minnesota has this edge right now. And like I said, I do want to see, I'm so fascinated to see game 1 to see what kind of edge New York is coming out with. But I think Minnesota has such a connectivity right now. I would say New York is a little more talented. And if New York comes out a certain way, like I said earlier, I wouldn't be surprised of either team winning. I think it could go either way. I'm with you. I think every game is going to be close to a classic, barring something just unexpected and tragic. I think every game is going to be high level, edge of your seat, down to the wire based on, the outcome based on like just a few key possessions, that kind of series. But yeah, I think I'm going with the Lynx. The Lynx in 5, man. Nafisa Collier, she's Finals MVP. I don't think they win unless she is Finals MVP and playing to that caliber, and I'm sure that she will. I'll add on to you so no Germans come after you. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Feebich. So make sure you give your girl some proper
you know
love.
what's funny? I think the last time I talked about her on the show, I pronounced her name correctly, and then I came back and just said her name incorrectly. My bad.
Yeah.
I don't want no smoke. I don't want no smoke.
Yeah, no, I listen to Ryan Rucco call games too much, so I got names like etched in my head, you know. So yeah, my girl Leonie Feebich, she is fire, bro. She is fire. I X Factor.
She's nuts, bro. Like I said at the top of the show, I'm more confident in the Lynx now than I was when I made the pick. Obviously, when I made the pick, I was distressed because Asia Wilson was in a boot at the time and things weren't going the way it needed to. But I do still have the Lynx winning. I do still have Nafisa Collier as my MVP. And so Nafisa after the game last night said that she can't wait to win the finals in 3. I do not think the Lynx are going to sweep the Liberty. I'm not an idiot.
Wow.
The Lynx have been, or the Liberty have been, I think, the best home team in the WNBA. So I do not think they're going to get swept. However, I do think the Lynx are going to win their 5th championship in history on their home floor. Give me the Lynx in 4. Nafisa Collier, Finals MVP.
I'm not going to lie. It's going to be, I think the story will be really cool if Minnesota wins. I think Nafisa Collier will be an awesome story to really put people onto just how great she is. It'll be a little, and Lauren asked us on the show when she came on a few weeks ago towards the end, if this is do or die for the Liberty. This will be, I mean, it's not the end of the world. It won't be tragic, but it'll be very disappointing if the Liberty don't pull this off. I mean, if it has felt like it was their time, and I thought maybe I was a year too early predicting that they would do it last year, because I just always felt like this group would win a title together. It just felt too right positionally across the board. It's just the right fit. It feels like, again, it could be their time. I think game 1 is going to tell us a lot. I cannot wait to watch that basketball game because it'll answer some of my questions. But I just, it's tough, man. I see Minnesota is answering so many of my questions. I picked Connecticut to win the series. So for me, Minnesota is like winning me over. I feel like the Liberty are as good as I expect them to be. And Minnesota is showing me that I think they're better than I thought. So I think that's why I guess I'm on their side. But I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Liberty come out and do it and win their first title ever. But I mean, to get that close, that would be tough, man. New York sports are booming right now. They could use a title. The Liberty sneaking in a title would be huge.
2 quick things, and I have a question for you as the second thing. The first thing is, I'm going to be honest with you, bro. If they don't win the chip this year, it might be it. And the only reason why I say it might be it. No, I don't think break it up. I think we have to remember, like
the window is closed. Like what?
I don't think it's going to be completely shut just because the talent is there, but I think it's going to be closing because we have to remember December 6th is expansion draft.
Yeah.
So this team is not going to be the team that we see entering next season, not just because of free agency, draft, trade, whatever, because half of this roster is going to be sent away for the Golden State team to potentially take on their roster. Now, we'll have to figure out what they do after that. But more importantly than that, if the Liberty can't beat the Lynx aren't going anywhere. The Aces, I think, this offseason are actually going to have some time to sit down and really retool their roster. And I think the Aces are going to be back with a vengeance next season. Like, I don't know. I actually don't know if the Liberty are going to be able to come back and run things the way the Liberty were the number 1 seed last season too. Like, this isn't just they lost to the Aces. This was like, they were the best season. They were the best team in the league last season and they lost in the finals. They're the best team in the league in this season. If they lose in the finals again, there might be some questions that we need to ask about the way that this roster is put together, about maybe something's just not working. Because if you have another situation where a lower seed comes into your house and beats you and they're better than you, like, I'm not going to say the window's going to be completely closed. I think as long as you still have Sabrina Ionescu playing at this level, Breonna Stewart and John Cole Jones at at a high level, you always are going to have a shot when you've got a big 3 with that talent.
Right.
But I'm just saying, a chip for Minnesota. We know what happens when Minnesota starts winning championships. They start getting a little bit groovy. Next thing you know, they're winning them left and right. So history's any indication. Minnesota's not going anywhere if they win this one. The Aces are going to come back, retool. Like the Storm, I think this was kind of that experimental year for them. I think they'll definitely be back and have things like the Liberty might not be able to just be the 1 seed, be better than everybody, and get back to the finals for a third consecutive season and then lose again like that. So that's the one thing. So if we're talking about pressure, we're talking about like who's got more to lose on, all the corny cliche questions that are asked whenever it's championship time. Liberty under more pressure. They've got more to lose.
Yeah,
all that
it'll
stuff.
be devastating. It would be devastating
for sure.
If you said they've been the best team. It's felt like their time. They got over the Vegas hump. They beat the Aces. Like it feels like it should be their time. Minnesota is right there on them, and I mean Minnesota's already shown that they can beat them throughout the season. Like they won the series through the season, so it's not like I mean, if they may have been the best team, but this was the other best team through the whole year. So this is the best test that they could have right now to really prove and show if they're ready. And that's why I said I feel like they do have more to prove. They still have something to prove to become champions. I mean, you still got to go out there and win it. You just beat the 2-time defending champions, but now this team it looks like they're ready to win a title. So it would be devastating, man, to get there 2 years in a row, not get it done, go up against a team that's not a super team. They didn't make some big additions like they did last year, bringing in Stewie and John Quell and Sloot. They added Courtney Williams and Alana Smith. They didn't make some big splashes, and
they didn't go get 2 former MVPs.
I mean, you got to get a title out of this, but I think that's fair to bring that up. I do think it would be devastating because I know they were devastated last year. That's why you see the fire they came out with this year and the edge that they have now. But we'll see. I think, like I said, game one is going to set the tone to see how people want to come out. Because I think Stewie is locked in. I think people are locked in on both sides. I think this is about to be
$0.30 for sure. This is about to be
basketball war right here, man.
Yeah. So now here's my question for you, and shout out to my guy Josh, because we were talking about this on Sunday, I think it was. We were talking about what happens if the Liberty win and Stewie gets her 3rd ring, because a bunch of people on Twitter were talking about how now what happens if Stewie gets their 3rd ring, and most people with common sense were like, yeah, well, Stewie's been in the league a little bit longer, so if she gets her 3rd ring first, makes sense. But if Stewie gets her 3rd ring this season with her resume, I know we talked a lot about where Asia Wilson ranks in the overall pantheon of players in the history of the league. We don't really have that conversation a lot about Stewie. I imagine if she's not in the top 10 already for most people all the time, she's certainly hovering around that. Let's say Stewie and the Liberty do win the championship, and more importantly, Stewie is Finals MVP. Where does that put her for you on the all-time rankings of the best players in the league?
She'd probably fall in my top 5 of all time. I feel like she should be comfortably top 10. I think pretty comfortably top 10 all time right now, unless I think she would fall in that top 10 for most people. But she delivers New York their first title, Finals MVP after these 2 years she's had with them. And her longevity is starting to become a thing. Her greatness over time is starting to become a thing because she keeps coming back just as good, if not better. So that would be huge for her. That's why at the top, talking about her versus Nafisa, there's kind of a Stewie legacy versus a Nafisa coming out kind of battle happening there, where more people are learning about the greatness of Nafisa Collier. We've known about the greatness of Breanna Stewart, but she has a chance to kind of remind us in a way and deliver the Liberty New York, their first championship. That would be huge. Those are 2 big storylines to, that we're going to possibly have coming out of this.
And for what it's worth, Asia Wilson's 2 championships, she had to get through Breanna Stewart to get to them, right? She had to beat the Storm on the way to the first championship in 2022, obviously beat the Liberty last season to win the championship this season. Breanna Stewart's championship, if I'm not mistaken, she has had at least one. They did beat the Aces in 2020 to win that championship. This would potentially be a second championship where she's had to get through Asia Wilson to get another one. So in the Breanna Stewart, Asia Wilson battle, things even up, and maybe we get to see him running back next year. And again, when you talk about the layers and the stories, that's a good one. It's just something I wanted to ask you, because we were talking about, like, who ranks where and what this means for Stewie, because people on Twitter were saying, now what happens if Stewie gets her third ring before Asia? And most people are like, well, I mean, Stewie's been in the league longer, so if she gets her third ring first, theoretically that would make sense because she's been in the league longer. But again, then you have the conversations about, super teams and all that stuff, which is why I think that's a great point that you made. If the Liberty lose as a super team to a team that's clearly not, that is another reason why a loss this year in the finals would be devastating. Last year, you lost to a super team. You just weren't good enough to beat another super team. That's reasonable. If you're a super team and you lose to a team that's not a super team, that adds a little bit of salt.
It's just a little bit. It's just a little that's going to be added to the conversation. It's going to come up. They're a great team. They're just great. No one's calling them a super team.
Yeah.
So that's just the reality. Yeah, that's going to come up.
Well, it was absolutely a pleasure to get back on the horse and talk women's basketball with my guy Martin Soares. As always, please feel free to like and subscribe to the Give It a Shot Network. For all of you guys that watch live, we thank you for watching live. For all of you guys that will watch this on the playback, thank you guys for watching. To see more women's basketball content from the Protect Our Queens podcast, please follow us on Instagram at Protect Our Queens _. You can also follow us on Twitter at PO Queens _ or X, whatever you call it. I don't care. Just go follow us. And we will be right back here next week with another episode. We'll be midway through the finals at that point, so we might have to figure out what that looks like. But we will be back here next week to talk more WNBA Finals. So for my guy, Martin Soares of Basketball Society, this is Marcus of the Protect Our Queens podcast signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys enjoy yourselves some women's basketball.